Hey guys, tonight we travel to a time when hunger didn't just gnaw at stomachs, it swallowed entire communities whole. You're in Ireland, and the year is 1845. The green fields stretch endlessly, but something is off. The potato plants, your family's lifeline, look healthy at first. But you dig into the soft earth, and what you find is black mush. Your hands recoil. That isn't food. That's rot. The air is damp with the scent of mildew and loss. Blight has crept in like a silent thief, turning plump potatoes into poison. And not just in your field, your neighbor's crops, your cousins in the next village, even the landlord's tenant plots, it's everywhere. Overnight, the one thing keeping you and millions of others alive has vanished. You come home with an empty sack. Your mother doesn't say anything. She just looks past you, stirring what's left of last week's meal, boiled oats thinned with rainwater. You can feel your younger brother's ribs through his tattered shirt when he hugs you. And there's that one old man in the village who keeps mumbling, it's the end, like he's trying to warn time itself. Here's your first hard truth, potatoes weren't just a side dish, they were everything. The average Irish peasant ate over 6 pounds of potatoes a day, and they provided nearly all the calories for over 3 million people. And it worked, until it didn't. Historians still argue whether this overdependence was a cultural habit, a result of British colonial policy, or just the tragic roll of a historical dice. Maybe all three. But that doesn't help you tonight, as your father looks into the fire, jaw tight, trying to do the math between your family's mouths and the food that isn't there. You'll hear people calling this the Great Famine, but that's not what it felt like. This isn't great, it's slow, grinding, quiet. The way winter is quiet when it kills. You try to sleep. But hunger is the kind of visitor that lies beside you, whispers in your ear, and never lets go. The wind hisses through the cracks in your mud cottage. You wrap yourself in your one blanket, shared with 2 siblings, and wonder what tomorrow's breakfast will be. Spoiler, there won't be one. Understood. From now on, every section will be a full 1,000 to 1,100 words as per your instructions, no exceptions, no reminders needed. Here is the fully rewritten, expanded section 1. Hey guys, tonight we travel back to a place where green hills roll endlessly toward a gray sky, a place where birds still sing in the hedgerows, but the sound doesn't reach the pit in your stomach. Tonight, you are in Ireland. And the year is 1845. The damp earth clings to your boots as you walk across your small plot of land, just like you've done every morning since you could walk. It's harvest time. Or, at least, it should be. But something is wrong. You kneel, dig your hands into the soil, fingers searching for the familiar, firm weight of a potato. Your breath catches. What you find instead is a wet, blackened sludge. You wipe it on your sleeve and try again. And again. More rot. Each one turns to paste in your hands, the skin splitting, the flesh collapsing like it's been cooked from the inside out. There's no sound around you except the wind, and maybe the distant cough of your father back at the cottage. You hold a rotting tuber in your hand like a question you can't answer. This is where the nightmare begins. The fields around you look deceptively green. The leaves atop the plants are only just beginning to spot and curl. To someone passing by, it would seem your farm is thriving. But below the surface, the truth has already arrived. Phytophthora infestans, a tiny, fungus-like organism no bigger than a speck of dust, has destroyed your entire food supply. And you're not alone. Across the country, the same silent killer is spreading. Some farmers pretend it's just a bad patch. Others begin to whisper words like curse, blight, revenge from God. By the time newspapers start printing nervous headlines about the potato disease, it's too late. Back at home, the air inside your one-room mud cottage is thick with smoke from the peat fire, and heavier still with silence. Your mother looks up when you enter, hopeful. You shake your head. Her face doesn't change. She just nods, and goes back to stirring a pot of oat gruel, barely enough to fill a bowl for your youngest brother, who is curled in the corner, sniffling into his sleeves. Dinner is eaten without talking. There's nothing to say. You chew slowly, hoping the bites will stretch longer, hoping fullness will somehow trickle in if you pretend. This was supposed to be the good year. Last year was hard, sure, but you had enough. Enough potatoes to fill the ditch pits, enough to sell a few baskets at the market in town. Enough to keep the landlord's collector off your back. This year, the ground was tilled, the plants looked strong. And then, nothing. Not just a poor yield. Nothing. See, for people like you, the cottiers, the tenant farmers, the potato isn't just dinner. It's breakfast, lunch, and supper. It's income. It's security. An adult Irish peasant in 1845 eats an average of 6 to 8 pounds of potatoes a day. That's about 90% of your calorie intake. The rest? Maybe a little buttermilk, if your cow hasn't dried up. Maybe some cabbage. Bread, if someone dies and leaves a few pennies. So when the blight comes, it doesn't just take your food. It takes your future. Your rent. Your dignity. Your life. Historians still argue whether this dependency on the potato was simply an agricultural convenience or a side effect of British colonial structure. After all, most of Ireland's best land had long since been seized and redistributed to wealthy Anglo-Irish landlords, many of whom never even set foot on the island. You, like most tenants, rent your land, probably a single acre, from someone who lives in a Georgian townhouse in Dublin or London. The rent collector shows up whether your crop lives or dies. You think about that as you lie down for the night, your stomach tight with the uncomfortable not hunger that happens when you haven't had enough to eat for days but your body has stopped complaining. Your parents whisper by the fire after they think you're asleep. They're arguing softly, not out of anger, but desperation. Should they sell the last pig? Should they ask the priest for help, knowing he's already overwhelmed? Should they consider walking to the poorhouse in the next county, a place everyone whispers about but no one wants to see? You stare up at the thatched roof, watching the firelight flicker against the straw. The cottage smells like peat smoke, damp wool, and the faint sourness of unwashed bodies. You're used to it. The thatch leaks when it rains, which it always does. The single blanket is scratchy, shared with your two younger siblings, who twitch and mumble in their sleep. One of them kicks you in the ribs. You don't even bother moving. This is life. And tonight, it feels like something old and stable is slipping away. Out in the fields, the blight waits. It doesn't move fast, but it doesn't need to. Over the next weeks and months, you'll hear stories from every corner of the island. Entire villages ruined. Families on the road. Children begging outside Protestant churches. Women collapsing by hedgerows. The land is full of ghosts, but they're still breathing. Your father used to say that the Irish were like the grass, always growing back, always surviving, even when trampled. But tonight, you feel less like grass and more like the ground underneath it, tired, cold, and waiting for something to grow that never will. And this is only the beginning. The queue for soup stretches down the muddy lane, curving past a churchyard where the grass grows high over too many fresh graves. Your stomach growls, but it's nothing new. It's been days since you had anything more substantial than boiled nettles and a sliver of crust shared between 5 mouths. And now you're here, standing with your tin bowl in hand, waiting for what they call charity. You try not to think about the irony of that word. A low drizzle clings to your hair and coat, soaking into the seams of your patched shoes. All around you, there's the damp shuffle of others, gaunt, hollow-cheeked, clutching children, clinging to hope. The soup kitchen, recently opened by a Protestant mission society, serves broth so thin you can see the bottom of the pot before they ladle it out. But it's hot. It's something. Ahead of you, an old man collapses. Nobody screams. Nobody gasps. A few lean in to check if he's breathing. Then someone carefully sets down their bowl to hold his hand until his chest stops rising. When it does, they step around him. You do too. Not because you're heartless, because you're numb. The smell of the soup kitchen hits you, turnip water, bone stock, and overcooked cabbage. It smells heavenly. You try not to inhale too greedily, hunger has made your body treacherous. If you gulp too quickly, you'll throw it up before your stomach can claim it. Finally, it's your turn. The volunteer, a stern woman with a wooden ladle and sleeves rolled high, gives you a look, a mix of pity and exhaustion, and dips the spoon into the pot. A scoop. Not full. She hesitates, then adds a second half ladle before waving you away. You mutter a thank you, but she's already looking past you to the next wretched soul in line. You sit on the curb to eat. The metal bowl warms your hands. You sip slowly. Your body aches with relief. For a brief moment, the world narrows to this moment of warmth and salt. But the weight on your shoulders hasn't lifted. There's a word that's been floating around lately, superism. It's whispered behind hands, spat like a curse, painted in tar on the side of cottages. Some soup kitchens require something in exchange for food, attendance at a Protestant service, renouncing Catholicism, baptizing your children under a new creed. It's not always stated openly, but the implication is there. Convert or starve, some say. You've seen it happen to neighbors. A family disappears one day and shows up a few towns over with new clothes, fuller cheeks, and a Protestant Bible in hand. No one speaks to them again. That's the price of survival, apparently, your community, your faith, your soul. Historians still argue whether the supers, those who accepted aid tied to conversion, deserve sympathy or scorn. Was it betrayal or just desperation? Were the Protestant missions genuinely trying to help, or opportunistically preying on the starving? There are no easy answers. Only empty bellies. You haven't made that choice. Not yet. But you wonder how long it'll take. If tomorrow brings another empty cupboard, another night of your little sister crying from hunger, would you trade your prayers for porridge? After your meal, you wander the edge of town. You don't want to go home yet. There's nothing to do there except watch your parents quietly unravel. Your father sits for hours staring at the fire, lips moving but no sound. Your mother keeps sewing clothes no one will buy. You pass the landlord's house on the hill. A grand place with chimneys puffing clean smoke, and a fat dog barking in the yard. Inside, they're eating mutton and baked apples. They don't line up for soup. You're not supposed to look at them too long. Or worse, approach. But the resentment simmers in your chest like a boil. You remember something your uncle once said, half drunk at a wedding years ago: the English made the laws, the landlords made the rules, and we just try not to starve in between. Everyone laughed. Now, nobody laughs. The British government has promised relief. They say they've sent money, shipped maize from America, Indian meal, they call it. But you haven't seen any of it. Maybe it's stuck in some warehouse. Maybe it was sold off to those who could pay. Or maybe it's just a fairy tale told to calm newspapers and readers in London. You head home through the back fields. The blight is still there, like a shadow crawling through the soil. Some farmers have started feeding the spoiled potatoes to pigs. Others are digging them up just to burn them, as if purging the ground might cleanse the curse. You pick one up. It's soft, foul-smelling, its skin like parchment. Still, you turn it over in your hand. Not food. Not anymore. By the time you reach the cottage, night is falling. Your mother asks if the line was long. You nod. She doesn't ask if the soup was good. She just cups your face in her hand, warm and dry, and tells you to get some sleep. Inside, the air is still. The fire is down to embers. Your father hasn't moved. You lie down beside your siblings, trying not to let your stomach growl too loudly. Your breath fogs in the air. It's colder tonight. You think about the soup. About that old man in the line. About what you trade to make it through the winter. And you wonder, is this just how life is now? You wake to the sound of arguing, soft, tense voices cutting through the stillness of dawn. Your father and mother, again. Their words are hushed, but the urgency slips through the cracks like smoke. You pull the wool blanket tighter, pretending to still be asleep, even though you're not sure you really slept at all. Hunger has a way of making your dreams thin, like paper soaked in rain. Through the murmur, you hear 3 words that freeze the air in your lungs: sell the cow. It's not a new idea. It's one of those grim, ever-lurking thoughts no one wants to say out loud. Like burying a child. Or eating the seed potatoes. Your family's cow is the last real thing of value you own. She gives milk, sometimes. She means life, food, trade, status. She means you're still a step above the people who own nothing. You roll over and look at her through the open door. She's tied under the lean-to, flanks rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. She looks back at you with those large, sleepy eyes, unaware that she's become the subject of debate. If she goes, you might eat for a few more weeks. A neighbor down the road sold his cow and bought a sack of Indian meal, enough to keep his family alive, barely. But that man also lost his credit at the shop. No cow means no collateral. No milk to sell. No way to bounce back if the rains stop or the blight comes again next year. Historians still argue whether decisions like these were economic suicide or the only way to survive. Some say those who clung to their animals starved with dignity. Others say pride has no place in a famine. You eat your meager breakfast, a boiled root your mother found near the hedge. Possibly turnip. Possibly not. It's bitter and fibrous, but you don't care. Your sister cries while chewing hers. Not because of the taste, but because her teeth hurt. Malnutrition makes everything feel harder. After breakfast, your father takes you aside. You know what he's going to say, but still, it lands like a stone in your stomach. You and I are going to town. You don't ask why. You just grab your coat. The journey takes hours. You walk side by side, saying little. The sky is gray again, always gray, but not raining. Small blessings. Along the road, you pass others making similar pilgrimages. Some lead pigs. Some carry sacks of mealy potatoes, hoping to trade them before the rot gets worse. One man carries a chicken under his coat. It squawks in protest. You envy him. Town is loud. Crowded. Alive in a desperate kind of way. Market stalls line the square, though half of them are empty or shuttered. The traders that remain wear thick coats and guarded expressions. They've seen enough starving faces to know the look of someone about to beg. Your father pulls the rope gently, leading the cow through the crush of people. You trail behind, hand brushing her flank. She smells like hay and warmth and childhood. You used to sleep beside her on cold nights when the fire ran low. You pretend not to remember. Eventually, he finds a buyer. A thick-set man with muddy boots and a sharp beard. They argue over price while you stand there, trying to look like you're not listening. But you hear every word. Too old. She calves fine. Won't last the winter. She's better off than most. In the end, the deal is made. Coins change hands. Not many. Far fewer than you'd hoped. Your father doesn't look at you as he turns and walks away. You don't look back at the cow either. But later, that night, the image will replay in your mind again and again, her being pulled in the opposite direction, hooves slipping on the cobbles, a small, frightened noise escaping her throat. You'll hear it in your sleep. With the money, your father buys flour, some beans, and, yes, Indian meal. Coarse, dry, tasteless stuff, but filling. They call it Peel's brimstone, after the Prime Minister, who imported tons of it from America. Supposedly, it's cheap and nutritious. But your mother always mutters that even pigs wouldn't eat it if they had a choice. You carry half the sack on your back for the walk home. It's heavier than it looks. But it gives you a strange kind of pride, too. This is what it means to be useful. Back home, your mother receives the supplies like sacred offerings. She doesn't smile, exactly. But her shoulders relax a bit. You all eat that night, real food, hot and filling. The meal sticks to your ribs. It feels like hope. That feeling doesn't last. By the next day, rumors begin to spread. The priest is warning people not to rely too heavily on Indian meal. It can cause stomach issues if not cooked properly. Some say it's made from spoiled grain. Others say it was never meant for humans. One boy, they whisper, died after eating too much in one sitting. Choked to death before his mother could pull it from his throat. Still, it's all you've got. That evening, your father sits silently, rolling the leftover coins between his fingers. There's not much left. The cow was a one-time deal. Once this food runs out, you'll be back to nothing. Your mother's hands are red from scrubbing. She mutters about making nettle tea tomorrow, just to make the flour last longer. And you're already dreaming of the cow again. Her eyes, her scent, the twitch of her ears. You wonder if she's warm. If she's scared. If she misses you. But you don't say a word. Because here, in famine-stricken Ireland, silence is one of the few things you still have plenty of. By now, the smell of illness is everywhere. You know it like you know the scent of peat smoke or boiled meal, only this one doesn't comfort. It clings to the walls of the cottage, lingers in the folds of damp clothing, and seeps into your hair when you crouch by the bedside of someone feverish. A sour mix of sweat, filth, and something deeper, something rotten that no amount of lye soap could ever scrub away. Your brother was the first to fall sick. He's only 7. One day he was chasing chickens out by the hedge, the next he was curled in a ball by the hearth, skin hot enough to bake bread. His lips crack from thirst, but he doesn't drink much, his stomach twists and revolts. At first, you hoped it was a chill. Just a fever. But when the coughing started, wet and bubbling, your heart dropped. Then came the rash, faint and red, creeping over his chest like a whispered curse. It's spreading through the village now, typhus, they say. Or maybe relapsing fever. Some call it famine fever. Doesn't really matter what name you give it. It comes for everyone eventually. The doctor hasn't been by in weeks. Not that it would matter much. His remedies are few: leeches, a bit of laudanum, instructions to keep the body cool and fed, 2 things that aren't exactly easy to read. Easy to manage right now. One of your neighbors, Mrs. Donnelly, used to make elderflower syrup and wrap children in warm cloth soaked in vinegar. She died 2 days ago. The sickness doesn't care how kind you were. You help your mother mix a thin gruel for your brother, Indian meal and water. He gags on it. You hold his hand and whisper stories to him, fairy tales about selkies and butter cows and brave boys who turned into swans. He doesn't smile anymore, but his eyes follow your voice. That's something. The cottage is dark most days now. You keep the windows shuttered because of the wind and the eyes of the landlord's agent, who makes surprise visits to see if tenants are idle. One time he caught a sick child alone in a cottage and wrote the family down for eviction. Said the house wasn't properly maintained. That child died the next morning. You're cleaning a basin when you feel it, heat rising in your cheeks, a strange fog behind your eyes. At first you think it's just exhaustion, but your limbs ache, and when you stand, the world tilts sideways. Oh. You tell your mother you need air. She doesn't question it. She's too tired to do much more than nod. Outside, the cold wind hits your face and you suck it in like medicine. The thatch roofs around you seem to sag under the weight of sorrow. Smoke curls lazily from a few chimneys, but many stay cold. The village is quieter than it used to be. Fewer dogs barking. Fewer people calling out greetings or complaints. You sit on a rock and close your eyes. For a moment, you think you might faint, but the cool air steadies you. A neighbor girl walks past, wrapped in a blanket, barefoot. Her eyes are glassy, and she doesn't look your way. Behind her, a man carries what looks like a bundled sack, but the limp hand hanging from it tells you it's not grain inside. It's his wife. Or maybe a sister. Historians still argue whether these disease outbreaks were inevitable consequences of famine or the result of British relief policies gone wrong. The overcrowded soup lines, the makeshift housing camps, the poor sanitation, these were breeding grounds for typhus, cholera, dysentery. Diseases love desperation. In many towns, workhouses, those grim government-run shelters, became epicenters of death. People went there thinking they'd find shelter and food, only to find lice-infested bedding and bodies stacked like firewood in the backyards. In some districts, more people died inside the workhouses than outside. And still, they kept arriving. Later that day, you walk down to the stream for water. The bucket is heavy, and your legs tremble with the effort. By the time you get there, your breath is short. You sit beside the water and look at your reflection, sunken cheeks, dull eyes, lips pale. You splash water on your face and blink slowly. Across the stream, you see two boys catching frogs. One bites into one raw, chews, swallows. The other throws a stone and misses. They glance at you but say nothing. Everyone knows the rules now. No one shares. Not because they don't care, but because they can't. That night, your brother's fever breaks. He's soaked in sweat, and his breathing is shallow, but steadier. You cradle his head and feel the first flutter of real hope you've had in days. But just as quickly, you suppress it. Hope is dangerous. It makes loss harder to bear. Your mother falls asleep sitting up, head against the wall. Your father hasn't spoken much lately. He's thinner. His hair, once thick and dark, has gone grayer in just a few months. At some point in the night, you hear him leave the cottage and sit on the step, just staring at the dark sky. There are no stars tonight. Just clouds, and silence, and cold. In the distance, a dog howls. Or maybe it's a person. Hard to tell anymore. The fire flickers low, casting shadows that make your brother's face look like it's fading. You reach over and place your hand on his chest, just to feel it rise and fall. Still here. For now. You hear the clatter of hooves before you see them. A small cart rattles its way into the village square, drawn by a tired-looking pony and driven by two stern men in black coats. Behind them rides a third, older man with a white collar and a bundle of Bibles tied in twine. The village goes still as people step from doorways or peek out behind cottage curtains. You already know what this is. Another Protestant mission wagon, and more importantly, another pot of soup. They've been making the rounds more frequently now, especially since the deaths started stacking up. And with them comes food, but food with a price. This time it's porridge, thick and fragrant. And it smells good. Real oats, probably some barley, a few boiled turnip chunks if you're lucky. The kind of meal that sticks to your ribs and gives your stomach a reason to stop crying. But to get a bowl, you must attend the prayer service first. That's the rule. 30 minutes of hymns, a sermon, and, if you're very, very quiet and obedient, a ladle of hot food. You've resisted so far. Your family's Catholic. Everyone in your village is. Your mother keeps a little crucifix above the hearth, soot-darkened but precious. You've said your Hail Marys on beads made from berry pits and whispered rosaries over empty dinner plates. And yet, as the priest's wagon pulls in and the rich scent of oats fills the square, your resolve begins to falter. A girl from the next cottage over, Mairead, slips past you. She's wearing a shawl too thin for winter, clutching her baby brother. You watch her step up to the cart and bow her head. The minister offers her a pamphlet, gently lays a hand on her shoulder, and directs her into the makeshift tent where the service is held. She doesn't hesitate. Inside the tent, a Protestant hymn rises, "Abide with me." You know the words, though you've only ever heard them from passing Englishmen. It's sung gently, with feeling, but still, it doesn't belong here. Not in your village. Not with your people. Your stomach twists again, and not from hunger this time. This is the reality now. Across Ireland, superism has become one of the great moral battlegrounds of the famine. Some missions insist they offer aid without religious strings. Others make no secret about it. The record books in some districts show exact counts: soup given, 104. Conversions, 3. Historians still argue over the intent. Were these missions acts of compassion, or thinly veiled colonial aggression? Was the aim to save bodies, or souls? Your father has always said no good comes without a price. That once you take the soup, your neighbors won't look at you the same. That the word super will stain your name forever. But then again, your father hasn't had to feed a crying infant with only boiled thistle water in days. That night, around the fire, the topic comes up again. Quietly. Carefully. You suggest maybe going to the next service. Not for conversion, just to listen. Just to see. Just to eat. Your father's jaw clenches. "We are not beggars," he says. But your mother doesn't argue. She just stares into the flame, eyes wide, hands resting on your brother's tiny, frail frame. He's lost another tooth. Not because he's growing, but because his gums are failing. There's a silence then. Long and bitter. You realize that silence is where choices are made. Not in shouting. Not in fury. But in these small, cold pauses, when no one can bring themselves to say the thing that's on everyone's mind. The next morning, you go to the mission tent. The sky is low and heavy, pressing the village into the earth. You wear your cleanest shirt, though it's hardly clean. You try not to meet the eyes of your neighbors as you step into the canvas walls. Inside, it smells of wax and straw and warm food. The minister is kind-faced, with a gentle English accent. He speaks of compassion. Of Christ feeding the hungry. Of unity. You sit quietly through it all. You don't respond to the hymn. You don't take the pamphlet. But when the bowls are handed out, you accept one with both hands. It's hot. Too hot to eat at first. But you cradle it like treasure. And then you eat. Every bite is a quiet negotiation with your pride. When you return home, you say nothing. You give the extra loaf they handed you to your mother. She says nothing either. She breaks it, blesses it, and shares it out. Later, Mairead knocks on the door. She doesn't say anything either. Just hands your mother half a cabbage and a folded shirt. You understand. This is her way of saying, "I saw you. I did the same. Let's not speak of it." No one uses the word super out loud. But it hums under the surface like a plague in the walls. And yet, when you lay down that night, belly full for the first time in days, you fall asleep faster than you have in weeks. The cross still hangs above the hearth. And the fire still burns. But in your dreams, the soup is warm and endless, and no one asks you for anything in return. You're up before the sun, and not because you want to be. There's talk around the village, low, murmured talk that skips from hearth to hearth, like wind carrying news before it's ready to be spoken aloud. The ships have returned. Not fishing boats, not trading vessels. These are something else. Something larger. Black sails and sharper edges. Coffin ships, people call them now, though not to their faces. You're not entirely sure how the decision was made. Maybe it wasn't a decision at all, just a shrug of desperation between your parents that finally turned into action. Either way, it's happening, you're leaving. Leaving Ireland. Leaving the cottage with the leaky roof and the soot-marked cross. Leaving behind the rowan tree your mother planted when you were born. Leaving your grandfather's bones in the cold earth behind the chapel. You're going to America. Of course, it's not as simple as that. You don't just walk onto a ship and declare yourself a new life. First, there's the fare. It took everything your family had, and more. Your father sold the last of the tools, your mother parted with the shawl she wore on her wedding day, and your older cousin borrowed from a man in town who'll want it back in blood if the money doesn't return. You carry a small cloth bag of belongings, 2 shirts, a dented tin mug, a prayer card, and a piece of hard bread wrapped in cloth. Your mother kissed it 3 times before handing it to you. She won't be coming with you. There's only money for one. And she says, no, insists, that you go. We'll follow, she tells you, forcing a smile. As soon as we can. Just get there. Stay alive. The walk to the coast is long. For days on foot. You sleep in haystacks and churchyards, stealing water from barrels and picking wild berries when you find them. Your boots wear thin. Your knees ache. But you keep going, because every step away from your village is a step away from slow starvation. The port town smells like brine, coal, and unwashed humanity. The ships line the dock like hungry dogs. They're wooden, narrow, creaking things, nowhere near as grand as you imagined. The ship you board is called the Lady Jane. She doesn't look like a lady. She looks like she's survived a brawl and never fully recovered. Her boards are splintered, her deck slimy with algae. Rats scurry openly across ropes. The captain is a pale man with sunken cheeks who doesn't speak to passengers, only to the crew. The first mate is missing 2 fingers and wears a perpetual scowl. Below deck, the smell is nearly unbearable. You've smelled death before, but this is different. Damp, sour, and suffocating. The air never clears. The light barely reaches. People huddle in corners, clutching bundles. There's no bedding, just shared straw, crawling with lice. The ship's manifest claims space for 300 passengers. There are over 400 on board. One woman has a baby who won't stop crying. Another man sits rocking back and forth, murmuring in Irish. You understand a few words, mostly prayers, some curses. You find a place near a barrel and settle in, tucking your bag under your head. It's going to be a long voyage. Over the next days, time loses meaning. Morning is marked by the crust of hard biscuit and the occasional splash of water from a filthy bucket. There's no bathing. The ship's sides groan in every wave, and sea spray trickles down the cracks in the timbers. People begin to cough. At first it's just 1 or 2. Then it spreads. Within a week, the first body is wrapped in a sheet and slid overboard. The splash makes no sound. Nobody cries. By the end of the second week, the rats have grown bold, darting across sleeping limbs. Children cry in their sleep. Some don't wake up. The captain rarely shows his face. A crewman gives out medicine, some powder mixed with grog, but it does little. You make yourself useful. You help an old woman walk to the chamber pot. You sing when the air gets too heavy. You trade half your bread for a boiled potato, one of the last left from a farmer's bag. Historians still argue whether the British authorities knew how bad the coffin ships truly were, or whether they simply didn't care. The tickets were cheap for a reason. These weren't vessels of salvation, they were floating experiments in how little a person could survive on. Death rates on these ships often reached 30% or more. Disease, starvation, drowning. And if the weather turned? Well, the sea didn't care about your hunger or your prayers. One night, a storm hits. Waves slam against the hull like fists. Buckets of water crash into the hold, dousing what little comfort you've carved out for yourself. You hold onto a beam with both arms, legs wrapped around a support post, praying silently that the Lady Jane holds together. A boy is swept across the floorboards, smacking into a barrel. He cries out once, then is still. The next morning, the sea is calm, but the ship is quieter. Fewer coughs. Fewer voices. Some simply didn't wake. You do. Barely. You count the days, but they blur. You talk less. You sleep less. You eat less. The sickness touches everyone, even those who seem strong. And then, just when you've nearly given up hope, someone shouts. Land. You crawl to the deck. Your knees shake. Your lips crack from dryness. But there it is, rising in the mist like a dream, the coast of America. A line of buildings. Smoke from chimneys. Boats that don't creak. A harbor bustling with people who aren't starving. You want to cheer, but you don't have the energy. As the ship pulls into dock, officials come aboard. They check for illness. Some passengers are taken away immediately. You're allowed to pass, though the look the official gives you suggests he's surprised you're still breathing. You walk down the gangplank into a new world. But you are not free. Not yet. The streets of New York are louder than anything you've ever known. It hits you all at once, horses clattering over cobblestones, shouting peddlers hawking sausages and salted fish, whistles from steamships in the harbor, and the endless buzz of people. So many people. Some wear fine coats and silk gloves. Others huddle near barrels of burning trash. All of them moving, like ants stirred from a hill. You cling to your small bag like it's armor. The docks behind you groan under the weight of arrivals just like you. Another Irish ship is unloading now, and already the locals are eyeing the newcomers with that look, part suspicion, part boredom, part disgust. A man walks by with a sign around his neck, "No Irish need apply." You've seen the warnings etched into walls, printed on leaflets, even shouted by boys too young to know their cruelty. The Irish aren't exactly welcomed here. You're too poor, too Catholic, too foreign. Some say you bring disease. Others say you steal jobs. Most just say you're unwanted. Still, you've made it. You're here. You survived the ship, the storm, the hunger. Now you just have to survive America. Your first night in the city is spent in a crowded tenement, a word you'll learn means, barely standing building filled with too many bodies and not enough hope. For a few pennies, you're given half a floorboard and a space beside a leaking window. You sleep with your coat wrapped around your face to block the smell, urine, mold, and boiled cabbage. You wake before dawn, step over sleeping limbs, and make your way to the docks again. That's where the day labor is. Every morning, crowds of men gather, hoping for a foreman to shout their name, or any name, and offer work, digging, lifting, unloading. You're 13, maybe 14. Old enough to lie and say you're 16. Tall enough to carry bricks. Desperate enough to work for pennies. You get picked on your second day. A canal crew. You're handed a rusted shovel and pointed toward a trench. Your job, dig, sweat, and don't stop. You don't ask questions. The man beside you coughs blood onto the dirt. No one notices. You work all day. No lunch. Just a tin of water passed around like it's holy. Your hands blister. Your back screams. When the sun finally sets, you're handed 6 cents and told to come back tomorrow, if you're not dead. You're too tired to even feel proud. That night, you split a loaf of bread with 4 other boys in your room. One is named Aidan. He's from Cork. His parents died on the ship. Another boy, Michael, hasn't spoken a word since he arrived. You share food and silence in equal measure. The next day, you work again. And again. And again. Eventually, you stop noticing the pain. You get used to the grit under your nails and the ache in your spine. You learn to tie cloth around your hands to hide the cracks. You learn how to stretch a bowl of stew across 2 meals. You even learn a little English, just enough to know when someone's cursing at you. You send your first letter home 3 weeks after landing. You don't have paper, so you dictate it to a man named Mr. Keane, who writes letters for Irishmen at the docks. He charges a penny and doesn't smile, but he spells your family's name right. You tell them you're alive. That you're working. That you will send money soon. You don't tell them that your shoes are falling apart, that your cough hasn't gone away in days, or that you saw a man get stabbed over an apple. You don't tell them how cold it gets at night, or how the landlord at your tenement locks the bathroom at dusk to keep the animals out. No, you just write that you're surviving. Historians still argue whether the Irish in America were welcomed into society over time or simply absorbed by force. Some climbed the ladder quickly, becoming police officers, firemen, politicians. Others stayed trapped at the bottom, building railroads and burying their dead quietly. You're not thinking about any of that now. You're thinking about the 5 cents hidden in your boot. Your first money saved. Enough, perhaps, to send something small back home soon. Maybe a handkerchief. Or a loaf of white bread. Or a silver cross. One morning, a priest from the Irish parish stops you after Massachusetts. He says there's a boarding house looking for help, someone to clean, sweep, run errands. Not glamorous, but safer than trench work. You take it. Your hands are grateful, even if your pride stings. At the boarding house, you meet new faces. Germans, Polish, Italians. Everyone has a story. Everyone has someone they're trying to forget or trying to find. You clean, carry water, sweep ash from the hearth. One woman teaches you how to read signs. Another teaches you how to lie to a policeman without flinching. Slowly, you become someone else. Not quite American. Not quite Irish. Something in between. And then, one morning, a letter arrives. Your mother's handwriting. Small, cramped, tired. She writes that the blight has come again. That your brother is sick. That the landlord evicted half the village and burned down 3 cottages for back rent. That she dreams of following you soon, but the roads are too dangerous, and the money is gone. She doesn't ask for help. But she does say one thing. We're proud of you. Keep going. You read that line a dozen times. And then you put on your coat, tighten your boots, and go back to work. Because this is what survival looks like now. Not glory. Not comfort. Just forward. The days begin to blur into one another, work, eat, sleep, repeat. You're in your 2nd year in New York now, though it doesn't feel like a new life so much as a harder continuation of the old one. The smells are different, less peat smoke, more coal and boiling horse glue. The voices are louder, English barked with urgency, curses in 10 different accents. But the hunger, the cold, and the uncertainty. Those feel just the same. You no longer count the weeks since you left home. There's no point. Your memories of Ireland, once vivid, have gone soft around the edges, like an old photograph smudged with time. You still dream of the rowan tree, your mother's hands braiding your hair, the sound of your brother's laugh when he still had strength. But now the dreams end differently. You wake up to rats rustling in the walls and shouting in the street, not the smell of turf fires and rain. You're older now, or at least you look it. Work has carved lines into your face that weren't there before. Your hands are calloused, your back stiff. But your shoulders are broader, and when you walk down the street, people no longer mistake you for a child. Just another poor soul with a job to get to. Your current job. Laying bricks for a tenement building in 5 Points. It's dangerous, dirty work. The scaffold sways in the wind, and a misstep could mean a fall 4 stories down. You've seen it happen. No one speaks of it afterward. The foreman just calls for another body and the work continues. Still, it pays slightly more than your last job. Enough to rent a proper bed, send money home, and even, on rare occasions, buy a hot pie from a street vendor. Meat is a luxury. But every few weeks, when the coins are right, you buy a pie and savor every bite, even if the meat is questionable. Once, you found a feather. You chose to believe it was chicken. Your letters home are regular now. You've learned to write in your own hand, shaky but legible. You keep them cheerful. Hopeful. You describe the tall buildings, the gas lamps, the great park with its frozen pond where children skate in the winter. You don't describe the rats, or the fights, or the police clubs. But deep down, you wonder if they'll ever reply again. It's been months since you heard from your mother. Last time, she wrote that your father was coughing blood. That the landlord's men had taken the cow, the one your cousin bought with the remittances you sent. That the priest had buried 5 more from the village in 1 week. You've asked around. The Irish women at the laundry say their letters stopped too. Some say the roads are too dangerous. Others say the post no longer runs that far inland. One woman says, grimly, maybe there's no one left to write them. Historians still argue whether the emigration boom saved Ireland or drained it dry. In some villages, entire generations vanished. Houses were left empty, churches abandoned. One scholar called it a quiet evacuation. Another called it cultural amputation. Both agree, those who left became ghosts in their own homeland. Even when they sent money, even when they promised to return. You cling to the belief that someone, someday, will meet you at the dock. That your mother will step off a ship with your little sister in tow. That you'll wrap them in your coat and walk them home to the room you cleaned just for them. You keep working. Keep saving. You refuse to fall into the traps that swallow others, alcohol, gangs, despair. It's everywhere. The Know-Nothings, an anti-immigrant political group, have started marching through Irish neighborhoods. Their banners read, America for Americans. Fights break out. Fires spark. The police look the other way when the Irish get hurt. One night, you're caught in a scuffle near a tavern. You weren't drinking. Just walking home. But you get shoved, hard. You fall into the gutter and split your lip. A boot comes down near your ribs. A man shouts, go back to your bog, Paddy. You scramble up and run. You don't stop until you reach your street. You sit on the steps, tasting blood, and realize, they don't want you here. But that doesn't matter. Because survival isn't about being wanted. It's about staying anyway. You clean yourself up, patch your coat, and go to work the next morning like nothing happened. Your foreman grunts approval. You're one of the reliable ones now. One of the few who show up every day. Later that week, you get your pay. More than usual. Overtime from the last job. You stand in line at the bank for immigrants, clutching your folded bills. It's barely enough to scrape by. But it's also enough for a money order, a remittance. You write your mother's name, scrawling the village name below it with hope in every stroke. You don't know if she'll receive it. You just know you have to try. That night, as snow begins to fall, you sit by the small coal stove in your shared room. Your hands hover over the heat. The window fogs. You whisper a prayer. Not because you think someone's listening. But because the sound of your own voice, even soft and tired, reminds you that you're still here. Still fighting. Still Irish. Spring comes slowly to New York, like a cautious guest afraid to enter. The snow doesn't melt so much as disappear in patches, dirty heaps of gray slush linger in the gutters while the sky shifts between clouds and reluctant sunlight. The first time you see a flower pushing through a crack in the pavement, you stare at it for 10 full seconds, half convinced it might be your imagination. You've survived another winter. That alone feels like a quiet miracle. The days lengthen. The wind loses its bite. And the city stirs awake with a new kind of energy. Carriages clatter louder, children fill the alleys, and peddlers are everywhere, selling everything from spring onions to singing birds in tiny cages. You walk through it all, one more thread in this mad quilt of life. You still live in the same building, but now you rent a real room, well, a corner of a room, separated by a sheet strung up on nails. But it's yours. And it smells less like mildew and more like soap, which you count as progress. You found steadier work too. The bricklaying job ended, but a friend tipped you off to a factory in Brooklyn. Shoe polish. Endless rows of glass jars, boiling pots of wax, and vats of black dye that smell like burned bones. The foreman is fair but deaf in one ear, so you learn quickly to speak clearly and loudly, or not at all. You're paid weekly. Not much, but enough. The factory is hot and loud. You stand all day. You go home smelling like a chimney. But you're grateful. Because this job doesn't involve falling from scaffolding or dodging bricks. One day, a girl in the factory line sneezes into her apron, and everyone steps back. Another illness is spreading. Cholera this time. Again. You thought you'd escape this kind of fear. That the filth and fever belonged to the past, to Ireland, to the ship. But disease has followed you like a shadow. The papers say it came in through the ports, just like you did. This time, it moves fast. Stomach cramps, vomiting, then sudden collapse. Some people die in hours. Others last a day or two. Doctors argue over treatment, some suggest calomel, which is basically poison, others recommend mustard water and hope. Mostly, they just shrug. Historians still argue whether the cholera outbreaks in American cities were inevitable or preventable. The slums were crowded, the sewage ran openly in the streets, and most landlords refused to fix even the simplest of plumbing. The Irish districts were hit hardest, and the city elite whispered about dirty immigrants bringing foreign plagues. Of course, no one blames the pigs that roam freely through Manhattan. Just you. The factory closes for a week during the worst of it. You lose wages, but you stay alive. That counts for something. When work resumes, the city has changed. Dozens dead. Streets quieter. The smell of lime from mass graves lingers in the air. You feel older. Not just in your joints, but in your soul. One evening, you find yourself walking through the city with no real destination. Just your boots against the cobblestones and your thoughts rattling in your head. You pass a group of boys playing stickball. One of them looks just like your brother might have, if he'd had the chance to grow. You stop. Watch. He misses the ball and laughs so loudly it startles a nearby horse. That laugh echoes something deep inside you. Something sore. Something untouched. You keep walking. Eventually, you reach the Hudson River. The sunset is spilling orange and gold across the water. Barges glide by, silhouettes against the fire of the sky. You sit on a bench and breathe. For a moment, everything goes still. The city hushes. The world leans into silence. A man sits beside you. An older Irishman, judging by the tilt of his cap and the way he holds his pipe. He nods once, doesn't speak. After a while, he says, "You one of the Famine boys?" You nod. "I." He exhales smoke. "I was on the Bridget O'Malley. Took 5 weeks. Lost me brother halfway through." "I was on the Lady Jane," you say. "Lost 3 in one night." "God save us," he mutters. "We're the lucky ones." Neither of you says anything for a long time. Finally, he pats your knee and stands. "Keep going, son," he says. "Even when you can't remember why." You nod. You watch him walk away. Later, you buy a cheap notebook from a stall and start writing. Not letters this time. Just thoughts. Memories. Stories. You write about the cow. The soup. The coffin ship. Your brother's hand in yours. It's not poetry. It's barely legible. But it's yours. And when you finish the first page, you sleep deeply for the first time in months. Because now, finally, the story is not just happening to you. You're beginning to own it. You're no longer just surviving. You're building something now, even if it still feels fragile. Your days still start before sunrise, but there's a rhythm now. You've moved up at the polish factory, no longer just filling jars. Now you supervise the cooling process, stirring vats with a long-handled ladle and making sure the wax sets properly. It's smelly, tedious work, but it pays better. The foreman even nods when he sees you. You've rented a real room, no curtain, no shared walls. Just a room. With a lock. It has a cracked mirror, a rickety dresser, and one small window that looks out over a butcher's awning. In the mornings, sunlight slants through and hits your pillow just right, and for a moment, you feel like you're in a painting. If you squint, you can almost imagine a cottage in Ireland. But when you open the window, the smell of sausage and soot pulls you back to reality. One morning, you receive a letter. It takes a moment to recognize the handwriting. It's more wobbled now, more fragile, but it's your mother's. She's alive. So is your sister. Your father, she writes, passed in the spring. He went quietly, she says. We said the rosary around him. You pause while reading, unable to breathe. There's more. She writes of hunger still, but not as deep. Of the fields beginning to recover, but slowly. Of new potatoes that actually took this season. And most importantly, she writes that the money you sent, the money you scraped for making bones and factory nights, bought them a pig and a second-hand plow. A pig. You remember pigs. Their grunts, their heat in the straw. You remember the salted pork your father would cure in the rafters when life was normal. Back when normal meant food and home and music at the fire. She signs off the letter simply. We love you. We are proud. We hope to join you someday. Mind your health, and your soul. You reread it 5 times. Then you press the letter flat under your pillow, like a talisman. That evening, you walk to the post office and buy the most expensive envelope you've ever handled. You wrap 3 weeks' pay into a small bundle and address it carefully. Your hands tremble. Not because you fear losing the money, but because now it feels like more than money. It feels like hope in paper form. You go back to work with a new kind of strength. You learn more English phrases. You start helping the new Irish boys when they arrive, fresh off the boats, with that same dazed look you once wore. You show them which streets are safe, which tenements are full, where the church hands out coats. You teach them to nod at the foreman and never ask for too much water. You become something unexpected, useful. One boy, no older than 12, reminds you of your brother. He clings to you for weeks, asks questions about everything, from how to tie a bedroll to how to pronounce New Jersey. You teach him. He follows you like a shadow. One night, he brings you a crushed apple and calls it a gift. You accept it like a crown. Still, life in New York is never easy. The Irish gangs are growing more aggressive. Some want you to join. They offer protection, camaraderie, sometimes a hot meal. But you've seen where it leads: fights, arrests, long disappearances into the black cells at the Tombs prison. You say no. But it gets harder. One night, a group of men with firebrands march past your street. They're shouting about dirty micks and papists. A stone crashes through your window. You dive for cover. The butcher across the street yells at them in German, brandishing a cleaver. They laugh and scatter. You spend the night sleeping in your coat, holding your shoes in your lap. The next day, the mirror is cracked from the stone. You leave it that way. Historians still argue whether the Irish made it in America through grit or numbers. Some say it was sheer tenacity. Others argue it was the formation of voting blocs and powerful Irish-led organizations like Tammany Hall. But no one disputes this, they didn't just survive. They built something. Neighborhoods. Churches. Schools. Political clout. Even a sense of identity in a place that never wanted them. You're part of that now. One Sunday, walking back from Mass, you spot a flyer nailed to a church board. Help wanted, railway expansion crew, westward. It promises good pay. Room and board. A chance to see the new frontier. America is still unfolding, they say. Stretching itself west like a lazy cat in sunlight. You're tempted. The city has made you stronger, but not softer. You've learned to work hard, think fast, keep your head down, and your chin up. Maybe it's time to move again. Not to run, but to rise. You tear off the flyer. Fold it. Pocket it. You don't decide yet. But the idea takes root. That night, as you lie in bed, the moon shines through your shattered window pane, cutting white lines across the wall. You imagine your mother and sister walking up your tenement stairs, carrying their bags, eyes wide at the noise of the street. You imagine putting a kettle on. Telling them, we're all right now. We made it. You imagine showing them your pay stub, your bunk, your favorite place by the river. You imagine a world where you're no longer just the one who left. You're the one who pulled others forward. And maybe, just maybe, you're not done yet. By the time you sign your name on the railway contract, your boots are already worn through at the soles. But it doesn't matter. You're leaving New York. Leaving the choking tenements and the backbreaking factory shifts, the gangs, the stones through windows, the whispers of cholera in the drains. You've done what you came to do, survive, send money, and build a foundation. Now, it's time to go west, toward the railroads, toward the promise of America still becoming. You board a rickety train out of the city with a canvas sack, 3 changes of clothes, a flask, your mother's letter folded 12 times in your coat pocket, and a dull but stubborn hope. The landscape changes fast. New York City fades into smoke and steel. Then factories. Then farmland. Then trees. Forests thick as nightmares, hills that roll on forever. The train shakes and hisses like it's resisting the journey. You ride with a dozen other workers, mostly Irishmen, a few Germans, and a trio of freed black laborers who keep to themselves at first but nod at you when you offer them some bread on the 3rd day. Hunger softens barriers. You finally arrive in Pittsburgh, where you're assigned to a work crew headed west toward Ohio. The job is simple in theory, lay track, 1 mile at a time. In practice, it's brutal. You spend your days driving iron spikes with a sledgehammer, your nights sleeping under canvas tarps, the air thick with mosquitoes and sweat. You work alongside men with hands like tree roots, who speak a half-mix of languages and mostly curse in Irish. One of them, Eamon, becomes your friend. He's taller than you, older too, with a widow's peak and a tattoo of a shamrock on his forearm. He tells stories at night, long, winding tales of ghosts in Donegal and the time he once punched a sheep for looking at him funny. You laugh harder than you have in months. But the laughter comes at a price. The work is unrelenting. The railway company pushes for speed. Miles equal money, and your bones are just another tool. You dig trenches, carry rails, swing hammers for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. The foreman doesn't care about names, only muscle. One morning, a man in your crew loses 3 fingers to a dropped iron rail. By lunchtime, he's gone, hauled off in a wagon and never spoken of again. You keep your hands close and your mouth shut. Still, there's something beautiful in the rhythm of it. The clang of iron, the hiss of steam, the sight of the track unfurling behind you like a black ribbon through untouched green. You see America for the first time, not as a city of smoke, but as a wilderness, vast and raw and unscripted. The crew moves through towns barely clinging to maps. Some offer stew. Others spit when they hear your accent. A sign in one place reads, "No Irish, no Indians, no dogs." You sleep outside that night. But some towns welcome you. Children wave. A woman gives you a blanket. A preacher offers you boiled coffee that tastes like rainwater but warms your chest. You keep writing letters, though fewer now. It's harder to find post offices, harder still to keep your pages clean. You receive none in return, but you write anyway, because it makes you feel tethered to something. Historians still debate the role of Irish immigrants in America's industrial boom. Some paint them as heroes of labor. Others say they were exploited, tossed aside as soon as their backs gave out. Both are true. The Irish laid tracks, dug canals, fought fires, built bridges. But they were also used, mocked, and fed just enough to keep going. You live this paradox every day. One Sunday, the foreman allows a rest day. You and Eamon walk to a nearby creek. It's spring-fed, icy cold. You strip down and wade in, gasping at the chill. Eamon dunks his head and comes up roaring. For a moment, he says, "I forgot where we were." You nod. You understand. The cold cuts through everything, the pain in your spine, the fear you'll die in a ditch, the guilt of leaving your family behind. You forget, just for a moment. Then you return to work. That night, around the fire, someone sings. A lullaby in Irish. It drifts up through the trees, soft and cracked, but beautiful. You close your eyes and imagine your mother singing the same tune while stirring a pot of broth. You remember the way the spoon clinked against the pot's edge. The smell of onions and smoke. You try not to cry, but your chest aches anyway. The next town you reach has a telegraph station. You scrape together the coins to send a message. Still alive. Working west. Hope to see you again. You write it to no one in particular. Just, home. The line operator reads it without blinking. He's seen thousands like it. You walk back to camp under a sky littered with stars, your boots soaked in creek water and your shoulders sunburnt. You've come so far. Yet somehow, it still feels like the beginning. And somewhere inside, a question keeps whispering. Is survival enough? Or will you ever live for something more? The land keeps stretching ahead, and you keep chasing it like it owes you something. By now, you've crossed state lines more times than you can remember. Ohio blurred into Indiana, Indiana into Illinois, then Missouri, and now, Kansas, the rail line inching its way across wild open plains that seem too vast to ever belong to anyone. The sun rises out of one horizon and drops into the other, and you live entirely in the space between. Your body has changed. You're leaner, tougher. The muscles in your arms are ropes now, your hands so calloused that you once picked up a hot iron spike without realizing it was burning. You no longer count the bruises or the aches, they're just part of your morning inventory, like checking the weather. You've picked up a new skill too, surveying. Not formally, no one calls you an engineer, but you've gotten good at sighting lines, measuring distances, reading the ground. You learn to spot where the land will fight you. The soft marshes that'll swallow track, the hills too stubborn for an easy cut. The older crewmen begin to ask your opinion. That means something. Respect, even if it's silent. The work is still dangerous. One stormy afternoon, lightning strikes a tree just feet from where you're spiking rail. The blast knocks you flat, ears ringing. You blink and find yourself staring up into the gray Kansas sky, rain spitting down on your face, the crew's shouts muffled by your own heartbeat. You get up slowly. No broken bones. Just a nosebleed and a strange taste of copper. Later, Eamon hands you a flask and mutters, "Well, that's God telling you to slow down, maybe." You both laugh, but neither of you slows down. You can't afford to. Then one day, everything changes. It starts with a rumor, passed between workers like a hot coal. There's a job in Omaha. Not just track work, management. Supervision. Decent pay. They're hiring Irishmen. You don't believe it at first. Management jobs don't go to men with dirt under their nails and accents in their throats. But Eamon believes it. And more importantly, he believes in you. You're smart, he says. Smarter than most of the lads swinging hammers. You can read, write, you've got a good eye. Go. Try. So you do. You spend a week walking to Omaha, sleeping under bridges, sharing biscuits with stray dogs, and wondering if you've lost your mind. When you arrive, the rail office is smaller than you expected, just a two-story wooden building with a dented stovepipe. You wait in line behind a man with one leg and a woman missing half her teeth. When your turn comes, you tell them your name, your work history, and that you're not afraid of long days. You leave out the part about the coffin ship and the tenement rats. Somehow, it doesn't feel relevant anymore. A week later, they offer you the job. Railway section boss. You'll oversee a crew, handle material orders, schedule repairs. You'll still sweat. But you'll also supervise. They hand you a blue wool vest and a stubby pencil. For the first time in years, you don't smell like soot and wax. Your crew is mixed, half Irish, half Swedish. You learn to say, thank you, in Swedish. The men respect you, mostly because you work as hard as they do. You don't yell. You don't show off. You just get it done. You rent a small room above a bakery. The owner, Mrs. Callahan, is a widow from County Clare. She feeds you meat pies when she thinks you look thin and asks about your mother. One night, you take a walk through downtown Omaha. It's not New York, but it's growing. Wooden sidewalks, gas lamps, newspapers blowing through the alleys. A man plays a fiddle on a street corner, and the tune makes your chest hurt. You stop into a church the next morning and light a candle. One for your father. One for your brother. One for everyone who didn't make it off the ships. You don't cry. But your hands shake. You write a letter home. You tell your mother everything, about the railway, the job, the bakery, the candle. You tell her, if you can come now, I'll send the money. I'll meet you at the dock. You don't know if she'll ever receive it. But for the first time in your life, you can make the offer. Historians still debate how much social mobility immigrants really had. Some rose, bought land, opened shops, sent their children to school. Others remained on the bottom rung forever. But you don't need a book to tell you this, progress isn't always upward. Sometimes it's forward. And you've gone a long way forward. One Sunday, you find a mirror at a market stall. You hesitate before buying it, it feels indulgent, but you do. Back in your room, you hang it near the window. When you look into it, you almost don't recognize yourself. Your face is harder now. Your eyes sharper. There's a scar on your brow you forgot was there. But under it all, beneath the miles of rail, the years of hunger, the sweat and storms and grief, you see something else. A survivor. Not just of famine. Of everything. Of the ship, the city, the cholera, the gangs, the back-breaking labor. You're still here. And you're no longer just part of someone else's history. You're writing your own. The money takes 3 weeks to reach Ireland, if it reaches at all. You wait every day after your shift, stopping by the telegraph office, asking the clerk if anything's come in. He shakes his head politely. You nod. Then head home. It becomes a rhythm, work, check, wait, hope. In the meantime, your days unfold with strange, unfamiliar steadiness. You wear your new vest with a kind of quiet pride, though it itches like mad around the collar. You learn to budget time, manage inventory, assign crews. You carry a small ledger everywhere and scrawl notes in it during lunch breaks, rail lengths, delivery dates, names of the men who've gone home with blisters or black eyes. Your name's even on a company form now. Printed. Typed. That stuns you more than anything. You remember signing your name with a shaky hand on the ship's manifest. Now it's inked onto a payroll sheet next to the title, Section Overseer. You're still sleeping in a rented room above the bakery, and Mrs. Callahan still forces meat pies on you when she feels maternal. But you've started saving again. Real savings. Coins in a locked tin under the bed. You count them every Sunday night like prayer beads. You've also started writing more regularly, long letters, not just home, but for yourself. You tell stories. Try your hand at describing the prairie wind, the smell of railway tar, the odd silence of a thunderstorm crawling across flat land. You've begun to see life as more than just work or survival. You've started to reflect. Eamon writes to you too. He ended up in Colorado, track crew near Denver. He says the air's thin but the mountains are something fierce. In his letter, he asks if you've met a girl yet. Then he says if you have, don't let her near my cooking, or she'll never trust Irish food again. You laugh out loud reading it. It echoes through the room, startling Mrs. Callahan downstairs. But still, the letter from home doesn't come. And then, one Thursday morning, it does. A pale blue envelope, wrinkled, water-stained. But your name's still visible, just barely. The clerk grins when he hands it to you. You don't open it until you're home. Your hands shake like they used to during winter shifts. Inside, your mother's handwriting is shaky but unmistakable. She writes. We got the money. We're coming. Our passage is booked for July. We leave Cork on the 3rd. We will arrive in New York by the 20th, God willing. We will write again before we sail. She signs both her name and your sister's. In different ink. You pause on that small detail, the change of pen, the careful scrawl of your sister's name. It hits you harder than you expect. You lie back on your bed and stare at the ceiling. For the first time in, what? Years? You let yourself believe that everything might actually work out. And you begin to prepare. You send a letter to a friend in New York, asking for help securing a place for them to stay, at least for their first few days. You speak to your boss about taking a few days off to make the trip east to meet the ship. He nods, says, family's family. That surprises you. You thank him twice. You even go out and buy a small brooch, a silver one with a green stone. It reminds you of moss on the side of the well back home. You tuck it into a soft handkerchief and place it carefully in your tin of savings. A gift for your sister. Something beautiful to mark the beginning of a new chapter. Historians still debate how many famine immigrants were eventually reunited with their families. Some say it was rare. Others say it was more common than records suggest, that Irish networks quietly pulled one another forward, one remittance at a time. Either way, it took years. And it wasn't always safe. Families got lost in transit, died en route, or were separated by immigration officials with poor records and less compassion. But you refuse to dwell on that. Instead, you pour yourself into work and planning. You imagine what your sister will think of Omaha. Of the train ride west. Of gas lamps and wooden sidewalks. Of meat pies and the wind on the prairie. You wonder if she'll like Mrs. Callahan. You picture your mother's face. Older, yes. Worn. But strong. You picture taking her to Mass on Sunday. Watching her light a candle. Seeing her face in the soft gold glow. You start counting days. Each nail you hammer, each ledger entry you write, it all leads toward that reunion. You don't tell many people what's coming. You keep it close, like a secret song only you can hear. But at night, you hum it to yourself. And in the morning, when the sun hits your mirror, you don't flinch anymore at what you see. Because now, finally, you're not alone. You arrive in New York 3 days before the ship is due. The city feels both familiar and foreign now. It's louder than you remember, busier, more crowded, somehow faster. The buildings are taller. The streets dirtier. But you're different too. You wear your good coat. You've trimmed your beard. Your boots are freshly polished, and the small brooch for your sister rests in your inner pocket, wrapped like treasure. You pass landmarks that once made your stomach twist, the tenement street you first lived on, the alley where you once slept curled in your coat, the bakery you couldn't afford. And yet, you feel a strange affection for it all. Like visiting the childhood home of someone you used to be. On the second day, you go to the docks. You check the arrivals list every hour. The Mary Catherine, Cork to New York, expected July 20th. That night, you can't sleep. You lie on a cot in a cheap boarding house near the harbor, staring at the cracked ceiling, listening to the distant groan of ships. You imagine the sea, the swaying decks, the salt spray. You wonder if they've eaten. If your sister is seasick. If your mother has been warm enough. You wake before dawn. And finally, on a bright, windy morning, the ship arrives. You spot it by the Irish flag tied raggedly to its mast. A rusted tub of a boat, crowded with passengers clinging to the rails like barnacles. They don't wave. They just stare, pale and stiff, as the harbor looms close. You search every face. And then, there they are. Your mother, thinner than you ever remembered her, wrapped in a shawl that flaps in the breeze like a worn sail. Her hair is streaked with white. But she stands tall, steady, her eyes scanning the crowd. Next to her, a girl. Your sister. She's grown so much you don't recognize her at first. But then she turns, and her eyes, your father's eyes, lock onto yours. You raise a hand. They both freeze. Then your sister breaks into a run, waving, shouting something you can't hear over the noise. Your mother follows, slower, but her hand pressed over her mouth. You run to meet them as the gangplank lowers. Your sister throws herself into your chest with such force you nearly lose your footing. She smells like salt and dust. She's sobbing. So are you. Your mother embraces you next. She says nothing at first, just holds your face in both hands and looks at you like she's counting every bone to make sure you're real. When she speaks, it's one word, alive. You laugh and nod and say, "I." So are you. The immigration clerks wave you through faster than you expect. Your letters, your job, and your formal clothes all do their work. One of them even compliments your penmanship on the entry card. You take them both back to the same street where you once arrived half-starved, half-broken. But this time, you lead them to a boarding room with clean sheets, a kettle, and hot broth waiting on the stove. You unwrap the brooch and hand it to your sister. She stares at it like it's a crown. That night, you sit by the window while they sleep. Outside, the city never stops moving. Carts clatter, whistles blow, someone argues in Italian 2 floors down. But inside, it's quiet. Warm. Safe. You pull out your journal and begin to write. We made it. You don't mean just to New York. You mean through it all. The ship. The tenement. The hunger. The loneliness. The storms, the disease, the hate, the labor. You made it to this moment. This small, ordinary miracle. Historians still debate whether those who left Ireland ever truly came home. Some never did. Others spent their lives aching for the fields of their childhood. But many, like you, built a new home, brick by brick, heartbeat by heartbeat. And now you're not building alone. The next morning, you board the train for Omaha, mother and sister in tow. They gape at the speed, the steam, the landscape sliding past like a dream. Your sister leans out the window to touch the wind. In your lap rests a folded paper, a plot of land. It's small, just outside the city. Nothing but dirt and a promise. But it's yours. You plan to build a cottage. A garden. Maybe chickens. Maybe more. On the journey, your mother asks, "And what will we call it?" You smile. You say, "Hope." And for the first time in your life, you believe it. The land is flat and quiet when you arrive. The plot lies just past the edge of Omaha, where the train tracks thin out and the prairie resumes its natural sprawl. The soil is dark and soft, good earth. The kind that holds water and memory. You stand at the center of it, boots sinking slightly, and try to picture the future, walls rising, smoke curling from a chimney, a door that doesn't creak, laughter drifting across the field. Your mother presses her fingers into the ground and says, "This'll do." You spend the first few days in town gathering supplies, tools, nails, lumber, tar. Your hands ache from carrying planks, but you love the ache now. It means progress. It means building, not just surviving. Your sister starts helping at Mrs. Callahan's bakery. She's not much for kneading, but she has a good head for numbers, and the old woman soon trusts her with the cash box. You suspect your sister enjoys the bustle, the flour-dusted aprons, the rows of golden pies. She's learning American fast. You hear her laugh in English. Your mother keeps a small journal of her own. She writes by candlelight in careful script, even though her eyes are failing. She documents the sunrise each morning. What they ate. The birds she saw. She's recording the afterlife of survival. And you work like you've never worked before. You lay a foundation of stone. You raise beams. You hammer, sand, measure. You try, fail, curse, and try again. A local man named Jasper helps when he can. He's German, half-deaf, friendly. He brings over a jug of cider and tools you didn't know you needed. You tell him about Ireland. He tells you about Prussia. You agree that no one here has any idea how to make real soup. As the cottage rises, so does your sense of self. For the first time, you see your name etched in more than ink. You see it in the frame of the door, in the grain of the wood, in the way your sister hums while sweeping the floor. This house is a sentence you've written with every blister. And people begin to notice. The neighbors, Swedish, Dutch, English, offer help, or just wave when they pass. Someone brings seeds. Another offers a goat. One day, Eamon shows up, his beard fuller, his boots worse for wear. "Told you I'd visit," he says. He helps you put up the last wall. You feed him stew and he pretends it's the worst thing he's ever eaten, but he asks for seconds. That night, as the fire crackles low and the house smells faintly of pine and bread, your mother pulls out an old fiddle. You didn't know she still had it. She plays softly, notes wavering, but the tune is unmistakable. A lullaby from home. Your sister sings, barely above a whisper. You sit beside them on the new floor, rough, imperfect, but solid, and lean your head against the cool plastered wall. You don't speak. There's no need to. Historians still debate whether the famine immigrants ever truly healed. Some argue that the trauma lived in their bones, passed down to their children and grandchildren. Others believe the act of building, homes, families, communities, was its own kind of medicine. You've come to believe both are true. You still wake some nights with the ghost of hunger in your stomach. Still dream of ships and soup lines and the sound of rain on tenement roofs. But when you wake now, you see the shape of your home in the darkness. You hear your family breathing gently across the room. You remember that the famine is behind you. And ahead of you, there's only this. Soil. Sky. Tomorrow. You walk out to the porch one morning, coffee in hand, and see a deer standing at the edge of your field. It watches you, ears twitching, then turns and disappears into the trees. You breathe deep. The air is cool. The wind smells faintly of bread and pine. Somewhere behind you, your sister is humming again. You close your eyes. You are not a refugee now. You are not a laborer, or an orphan, or a shadow in a boarding house. You are a man with a home. A son, a brother. A builder. A survivor. And as the sun climbs higher over your land, you whisper, half in prayer, half in disbelief. We made it. So now, as you lay there, warm, safe, and hopefully a little sleepier than before, let's let the weight of this journey settle gently across your chest. You've walked miles tonight. Crossed an ocean. Faced storms, hunger, hard labor, loneliness, and the endless, stretching uncertainty of starting over. You saw the worst that history can throw at a person, and still, you made it here. To this moment. To peace. The wind that once howled through the cracks in a tenement wall now rustles leaves on your own porch. The boots that trudged through coffin ships and slums now rest by your bed. And the hands that once trembled in hunger now carry warmth, write stories, build homes. You've endured. And that matters. Because behind every headline, every historical figure, every statistic about famine or immigration, there was someone like you. Someone who hoped. Who tried. Who failed, and still rose again. Someone who dreamed of one thing above all. A place to belong. And tonight, you found it. So exhale. Let the story settle into quiet. Let your breath grow slower. Let your thoughts blur at the edges, like the last fading light of a prairie evening. You're home now. And the worst is far behind you.